The Lucy show unfolds with Lucy arriving at the bank in one of her unusually energetic moods. The kind that instantly makes everyone else nervous because it usually means she has an idea. And as expected, it doesn't take long before she starts noticing what she believes is a major inefficiency in how things are being run. Something small at first glance, like the way customer requests are processed or how paperwork gets routed between desks. But in Lucy's mind, this minor inconvenience quickly expands into a full-scale problem that only she seems capable of solving. And as she begins explaining her observations to Mary Jane, her tone carries that familiar mix of confidence and urgency, presenting her conclusions as if they are obvious truths that everyone else has somehow overlooked, while Mary Jane listens with cautious skepticism, already sensing that Lucy's solution will likely create more trouble than it resolves. And despite her attempts to gently question the logic behind Lucy's plan, Lucy pushes forward, reframing every concern as proof that change is necessary, and before long she starts outlining a new system that promises to speed everything up, reduce confusion, and impress Mr. Mooney, who at this point has not yet realized that he is about to become the unwilling subject of Lucy's latest experiment. And the humor begins to build as Lucy takes it upon herself to implement these improvements without waiting for approval, reorganizing files, redirecting tasks, and even subtly instructing customers in ways that align with her new structure, all while maintaining the illusion that everything is perfectly under control. And at first, there are small moments where it almost seems like her plan might work, with a few transactions moving faster than usual and a couple of customers expressing mild satisfaction, which only reinforces Lucy's belief that she is on the right track, causing her to double down on her efforts and expand the system further, adding more layers and adjustments that quickly become too complex to manage. And as the day progresses, the cracks start to show, with employees becoming confused about their roles, customers receiving mixed instructions, and documents ending up in the wrong places. But Lucy interprets these issues not as failures, but as temporary growing pains, insisting that once everyone adapts, the system will function flawlessly, and this denial is what allows the situation to escalate beyond recovery. Because instead of scaling back, she continues to push forward, introducing even more changes in an attempt to fix the problems caused by the previous ones, creating a chain reaction that spreads through the entire bank. And it is at this point that Mr. Mooney begins to notice that something is seriously off, as his usual orderly environment has been replaced by a kind of controlled chaos that he cannot immediately explain. And his frustration grows as he tries to trace the source of the disruption, questioning employees who give inconsistent answers, following paperwork that leads nowhere, and encountering customers who are increasingly confused or impatient. And eventually all paths lead back to Lucy, who is still operating under the assumption that she is improving things, confidently explaining her system to Mr. Mooney in a way that highlights its intended benefits while conveniently overlooking the actual results. And Mr. Mooney's reaction is a mix of disbelief and exasperation, as he realizes that what Lucy sees as innovation is in fact the cause of the entire problem, and he immediately orders her to stop and revert everything back to the original system. But by this point, the changes have spread so widely that undoing them is not a simple task, requiring time, coordination, and a level of patience that no one in the bank currently has. And this leads to a frantic effort to restore order, with Lucy, Mary Jane, and the other employees scrambling to retrace their steps, refile documents, clarify instructions, and calm frustrated customers, all while Mr. Mooney supervises with increasing agitation, occasionally stepping in to correct mistakes, but mostly watching the consequences of Lucy's actions unfold in real time. And throughout this process, Lucy begins to slowly recognize that her plan did not have the effect she intended, though she is reluctant to fully admit it, instead framing the situation as a misunderstanding or a misapplication of her ideas rather than a flaw in the ideas themselves. And this subtle deflection allows her to maintain her sense of confidence even as she participates in fixing the mess she created, and eventually, after considerable effort, the bank is restored to its original state with systems back in place, employees returning to their normal roles, and customers once again moving through the process without confusion, and Mr. Mooney delivers a firm lecture to Lucy about the importance of following established procedures and not taking unauthorized initiative, emphasizing that while creativity can be valuable, it must be balanced with responsibility and awareness of consequences. And Lucy appears to accept this, at least on the surface, nodding in agreement and expressing a willingness to stick to her assigned duties moving forward. But as the episode reaches its final moments, there is a subtle indication that her mindset has not fundamentally changed, as she casually remarks to Mary Jane that with just a few adjustments her system could have worked perfectly, hinting that she still believes in her original idea and may attempt something similar in the future. And Mary Jane's reaction reflects a mix of exhaustion and resignation, recognizing that Lucy's pattern of behavior is unlikely to change despite repeated lessons, while Mr. Mooney, overhearing just enough of the conversation to understand its implication, reacts with immediate concern, reinforcing his earlier warning and making it clear that any further improvements will not be tolerated. And the episode closes on that familiar comedic note where order has been restored, but the underlying dynamic remains unchanged, with Lucy's optimism and impulsiveness poised to create new situations, Mary Jane caught between support and caution, and Mr. Mooney bracing himself for whatever comes next, maintaining the show's ongoing theme that while problems may be resolved, the personalities that create them are constant, ensuring that each new day brings the potential for another cycle of well-intentioned chaos and reluctant resolution. And even though everything appears to have settled back into its usual rhythm, the aftermath of Lucy's experiment lingers in subtle ways that only she seems to notice at first. Because while everyone else is relieved to return to familiarity, Lucy can't quite shake the feeling that she was close to proving something important. And that thought keeps circling in her mind as she resumes her normal duties, causing her to observe the workflow more carefully than before. Not with the same reckless urgency, but with a quieter, more persistent curiosity. And as she watches customers move through the system and sees the small delays and inefficiencies she originally fixated on, she begins mentally reconstructing her plan, this time adjusting it in her head, smoothing out the flaws, imagining how it could have worked if she had introduced it differently or if people had understood it better. And this internal revision creates a kind of tension within her because she now knows firsthand how quickly things can spiral out of control. Yet she also feels that abandoning the idea entirely would mean admitting that she was completely wrong, which is something she resists on instinct. And this conflict plays out in small moments where she almost speaks up to suggest a change but then stops herself, glancing toward Mr. Mooney's office as if expecting him to sense her thoughts from a distance, and for a while she manages to keep those impulses contained, focusing instead on doing things exactly as instructed, which in itself becomes a challenge because it requires her to suppress the very instincts that usually drive her actions. And Mary Jane notices this shift and initially feels relieved, interpreting Lucy's restraint as a sign that she has finally learned her lesson. But as the day goes on, she also picks up on the subtle signs that Lucy's mind is still working in the background. The way she hesitates before completing a task, the way she watches others as if analyzing their methods. And this creates a different kind of concern, because while Lucy is no longer actively causing chaos, there is a sense that something is building again beneath the surface. And that sense proves accurate when a small, seemingly harmless situation presents itself. Something minor like a customer asking a question that falls slightly outside the usual procedure. And Lucy sees in that moment an opportunity to apply a safe version of her idea, convincing herself that this time it will be different because she is only making a tiny adjustment rather than restructuring everything. And she proceeds cautiously, offering a suggestion that deviates just enough from the standard process to test her revised thinking without drawing attention. And at first it works, the customer responds positively, the interaction moves smoothly, and Lucy feels a surge of validation that reinforces her belief that her instincts were not entirely misguided. And that small success becomes the spark that reignites her confidence, leading her to repeat the behavior in other small situations, each time telling herself that she is staying within reasonable limits, that she is not repeating the same mistake. And for a while, this controlled experimentation goes unnoticed, blending into the normal flow of the day in a way that feels almost like progress. But as before, the accumulation of these small deviations begins to create inconsistencies. Not dramatic enough to cause immediate disruption, but enough to introduce confusion among the staff, with different employees handling similar situations in slightly different ways based on Lucy's quiet suggestions. And this inconsistency slowly builds until it reaches a point where the system starts to lose its coherence again. And although the scale is smaller than before, the underlying pattern is the same, and it doesn't take long for Mr. Mooney to sense that something is off once more, his awareness sharpened by the earlier incident. And as he begins to investigate, he quickly notices the irregularities, tracing them back through a series of minor discrepancies that all seem to connect in subtle ways, and once again Lucy becomes the focal point. Though this time the situation is more nuanced because her actions are not as overt or disruptive, making it harder for her to see them as problematic. And when Mr. Mooney confronts her, she initially defends herself by emphasizing that she was only trying to help in small ways, that she was careful not to interfere with the overall system, and that in some cases her adjustments actually improved efficiency. And this defense creates a moment of ambiguity because she is not entirely wrong, but Mr. Mooney counters by pointing out that consistency is just as important as speed, and that even minor deviations can undermine the stability of the entire operation if they are not coordinated. And this explanation forces Lucy to confront a more subtle lesson than before, one that is not about avoiding large mistakes, but about understanding how even well-intentioned small changes can have broader effects. And for a moment she seems to genuinely consider this, her usual confidence giving way to a more reflective expression as she processes the idea that the problem was not just the scale of her actions, but the lack of alignment with everyone else. And this realization doesn't completely resolve her internal conflict, but it does shift her perspective slightly, leading her to approach the rest of the day with a different mindset, one that is less focused on proving her ideas and more on observing how things function as a whole. And as she continues working, she begins to notice patterns she hadn't fully appreciated before, the way different roles connect, the way timing and coordination affect outcomes, and this broader awareness creates a quieter kind of engagement, replacing her earlier urge to control with a growing understanding of how to fit within the system without disrupting it. And by the end of the episode, there is a subtle but meaningful change in her behavior, not a complete transformation, but a shift toward balance, where her creativity is still present but tempered by a greater sense of context. And while Mary Jane and Mr. Mooney remain cautious, expecting that Lucy's tendencies may resurface at any time, there is also a hint that she has taken a small step forward, not by abandoning who she is, but by beginning to understand how her actions ripple outward, and the final moment reflects this delicate equilibrium, with Lucy pausing before making a suggestion, considering it, and then choosing to keep it to herself, not out of fear, but out of awareness, leaving open the question of how long this balance will last while reinforcing the show's ongoing theme that growth is not a sudden change, but a series of small, often fragile adjustments that must be continually maintained.